Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we have some amazing reports for you, analysis and questions. The most important thing you can do when you listen to our program, or any program, is to ask better questions. And we try to vet the information we provide. We also try to qualify it so that you understand our sources and the reason why our analysis arrives at certain conclusions. And joining us on every Friday for our Preparedness, Civil Defense, Earth Changes Hour, we have John Moore, who has his own program over at Republic Broadcasting, 7 to 9 a.m. TheLibertyMan.com is his website, TheLibertyMan.com. Our scientist, Ann Morrison, Homeland-Defense, 4U.com. Earthquakes, sinkholes, atmospheric and space weather changes occurring to the planet, volcanism and earthquakes. And of course, John is an expert as well on Earth changes. He has contacts being in former special forces. He's currently a forensic investigator, so he uses lots of rules of finding evidence and verifying. So, John, you have some new breaking news that you want to mention and some pretty significant conclusions to make based on that evidence. Can you tell us what's going on?
Yes, sir. Well, since last Friday when we visited, my confidential source is mine, and I'm also working with another investigator, Doug Hagman, who's with the Northeast Intelligence Network, and Steve Quayle as well. All three of us have independent sources that are saying the third week of October there will be an event severe enough that it will be a contrived economic event, severe enough that there will be also a bank holiday, civil disorder, and United Nations troops called in to restore order. The consequence of all that being there will be no election in November. We hope this doesn't happen. At the moment, we see no way around it. The Russian troops are here. The Chinese troops are just below the southern border. And they're not here for a good reason. They're not here to help us and be our friends. They're here because they're our enemy and to exercise their control under a martial law scenario. So yeah. That's where we are, and that's where we're headed, sir.
Yeah, and if we just look at it boldly, we don't. There was a nice speech that Romney put on last night. It wasn't nice what they did to Ron Paul. I think that indicates they want to do rule changes, so nobody can ever have a Ron Paul type revolution there. We do not definitely want Obama. I think no matter what government we have, we could do better with Adolf Hitler than Obama. But what we have is a situation of it's better or awful. The situation is, though, that one of the globalists they always try to do is try to prove to each other, because of their timing and specific dates or certain architecture or means of communication, that they're in control. The real big lie is these fools aren't in control, and they really have, in many cases, done stupid things that there's a lot of, you want to call, infighting occurring at the top.
Right.
And that's why we get leaks from things like Homeland Security. That's why we have the Homeland Security and other agencies. That's why we have the IDF 3 weeks ago decided not to go along with the Israeli plan. I have no problem with them getting control through various forms of heavy diplomatic avenues to go in there with an exploratory team to neutralize the RDX and high explosive and VX nerve gas in Syria. But promulgating a revolution against Assad, who is not a standing enemy of America, is just stupid when you're going to replace it with an enemy who's most likely to use weapons. There's 15 major banks. 5 really giant banks in America are teetering if the European debt crisis hits the fan. It already is. It's hitting the fan now. The Spanish and the Italians cannot service their debt. The European Central Bank can't give them the money, and the German government has basically outlawed the German government, even if they wanted to print it, and even if they gave them all the money they had, it's not enough to resurrect Europe.
Right.
The European Central Bank and these bankers, their solution to the problem is to bring about world war, which is why NATO, which is primarily Europe, and the bankers and America, and by the way, it's both Obama and Romney have backed war. Now, war is not the solution. We can do hard negotiations. The best war, as anybody in the military knows, is not one that you fight, but one that you show with such outstanding strength and strategy and logistics, the other side doesn't even want to fight. They obviously didn't read The Art of War by Sun Tzu. So it means we have morons at the top that don't realize you don't build down your military like Obama 90%. You don't have people that just categorically say, we're just going to attack them and see what happens, how many people die in the whole procedure, like so far what I heard from Romney. But we do know that an economic chaos is coming. We know that at the very least by January, we call the fiscal cliff, $500 billion will be withdrawn from the U.S. economy. That means, according to economic experts, 2 million jobs will disappear next year. Now, I think that Obama is teetering. I would have said before, even a few weeks ago, that Obama was pretty well a shoo-in by 78%, and they even had Soros buy out the electronic voting machines, but they can only tilt the vote by some 6-7%, before it becomes too obvious in any one district. So with the addition now of Ryan and the jobs message rather than the message, and this is the clearest part of the message last night from Romney, was Obama said he was going to prevent the rising of the oceans and save the planet. I'm here just to help you and your families. And that will resonate with the average American that can just see, oh my gosh, I lost $4,000 in income per year since Obama's in. I want a job, and I don't want to be taxed anymore.
Right.
And Ryan has a policy. By the way, Ryan does have a clue at how to balance the budget. And by the way, you can print more money, just like in Nazi Germany before they went crazy, and not have austerity fascism like Ron Paul talks about, that you have to, quote, balance the budget even on people's necks. Ayn Rand I'm not a fan of Ayn Rand. She's an anti-religionist. She's an anti-God person. I don't think that Ayn Rand is a real template for what we want to do. It's basically Austrian austerity fascism, which is what kept the royals in power for centuries during the Middle Ages. So I'm not a fan of that. I do feel that the idea that we are controlled, disentangle ourselves from being an empire is ridiculous. But it doesn't mean we have to entangle ourselves in stupid wars. For example, our interactions in many cases can just be a tough phone call.
That's right.
It can be a policy. It can be not transferring technology to our potential enemies. It can be not selling jets to the Saudi Arabians and the Qataris that are potential enemies of Israel. It can be an idea of calling up Bashar Assad and say, I'm sorry we killed your people. We supported these maniacs that are killing your citizens and your soldiers, but we're going to bring it in a combined task force, and we need to stabilize and make sure these weapons are safe, and we will leave some people in place that'll make sure they're safe, and you can keep them in your own country. We just want to make sure they're safe, and you're not going to use them against your citizens or against us. We're not going to invade, and we're going to verify that. That would solve the problem. Same with Iran. Do they think that they can just go waltz in and hit Iran and they're not going to have a backwash of biological weapons, missiles coming at countries like Poland and other countries that are supposed allies of NATO without a backwash of biological weapons, nuclear weapons, etc.? No. This is not, you count, as they say, there's no winners in war, there's just what's left.
Well,
right?
The majority of casualties in every war are innocent men, women, and children.
Right.
That's true of every war since we've had records of war.
So it's okay to talk tough, but you actually have to talk smart. And there's a heck of a lot of difference between talking tough and smart and talking tough and stupid.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And a real military general, just like we had James Hutchins, who is a brigadier general on Tuesday, and he's with the Jerusalem Connection. He agrees with me totally on our policy. We need to talk tough and do stuff. We need to go into Syria and make sure those weapons are... We need to make sure those rockets are named from Hezbollah. We need to make sure that Muslims in America aren't teaching 5 pillars of Islam in 1/4 of the mosques in the United States. I have no problem with Americans being Muslim as long as they do not adhere to jihad. This is a no jihad zone.
Well, how about no Sharia law zone?
No Sharia, the same thing. No Sharia law zone. This is something that's not negotiable.
How about not having sex with your dead wife for 7 hours?
Exactly. Isn't that disgusting? There's a whole lot of things that I think are so obscene about various aspects.
How about mainstream Islamic clerics coming out against female circumcision? I've never heard that.
No. What we have to do is we need to get real. And we have to also realize who our friends and enemies are. And the Russians and Chinese are not our buddies, and neither is Islam. But we can still live in a peaceful world without being victims, and without spending our entire budget, and without building down our military to make ourselves vulnerable. I remember when I lost my mind. Welcome back, and John, let's look at the timeline of all the things going on. You pull a lot of information together from various sources. A lot of people have tried to accuse you of saying, you said that this Planet X was coming in and it didn't, and all these things didn't happen. You never set a date. Yeah. You never set a date. You had one source. I actually got an iPhone picture from the Southern Hemisphere the last few days that actually shows a picture showing the incoming, I don't know if they photoshopped it, but it's exactly like the picture you'd expect to see if you had a red dwarf star coming in not too far off of line, so many degrees off line of the sun, with a plasma field on either side they called a winged dragon. That's what it was called, the ancient cartouche in Egypt. And a lot of people say, well, you're not putting the dates as to when it's coming. I don't know, but I know that they're visualizing it. We have had astronomers in Brazil with the South Pole Telescope, others, IRAS, the Chandra X-ray Telescope, and by the way, the Arecibo, which is not a visual telescope, it's one of these radio telescopes. They can see it. Okay, so the fact is, it's coming in. We're also in an energetic part of the galaxy, which is increasing energy to the planet. Now, if you talk to people like Stan Deo and others, there's very good evidence that the actual size of the planet Earth was probably about a third smaller at the time before the ancient destruction of Pangaea, which means in ancient times the Earth was considerably smaller, and then it expanded like a Christmas bulb after being spun by a glassblower. That the breakup of the continents, the first time I ever saw it, and said, well, this looks interesting. South America and Africa would fit together, but the Earth looks like a bigger balloon. The sinkholes, and I want you to talk about this, Ann, the sinkholes are probably tied to the fact that there's some major Earth changes occurring. Tectonic plates are shifting, sinkholes are occurring, the energetics of the inside of the planet is increasing, volcanism everywhere is increasing underneath the Gakau Range, 1,500 kilometer long range of mountains as high as the Swiss Alps in the Arctic. And on top of that, we're having a lot more cosmic background radiation that's increasing rainfall, forming micronuclei, increased energetics that's also driving the nuclear reactor we call Earth, because it's a nuclear reactor with a crust on it and a thin blue line of air with a magnetic field around that protects us from the cosmic background radiation, gamma rays, and zeta particles, etc., that would otherwise make life impossible. So, according to Stan, and I think that there's some pretty good evidence to this, that the Earth actually has tectonic plates that float on oceans of oil that's abiotic for the nuclear reactor of the Earth, that the planet, in fact, is bigger than it used to be. The atmospheric pressure, according to biblical and other records, and we've talked about this, is probably half what it used to be. And the magnetic field is 1/100th what it was at the time of the dinosaurs, and probably as little as 1/20th what it was even at the time of Babylon. Our magnetic field has dropped dramatically, and when you combine that with cosmic and other events such as a returning red dwarf star, we live in a very violent universe that has cyclical disasters that come and strike our civilizations and crush us. Any comments, John?
Well, that's well documented, and you go through 16 years of education through and graduate with a 4-year college degree, and fully believe that once you get back 6,000 years in human history, we could barely figure out how to herd goats, when exactly the opposite is the case, because when you go back 12,000 years, our ancestors could split the atom and go into space both.
Right.
And that's well documented and well known among anybody who looked at archaeology seriously.
Right.
So they're hiding our true history as human beings occupying this planet.
We're not genetically different from our ancestors 6,000, 10,000, 12,000, even 50,000 years ago.
No,
what's really going on is that our civilization has been whacked either by internal wars or a combination of wars and galactic and cosmic changes that crushed our civilization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But unless you understand where you've been, you cannot possibly understand where you're going. You can't.
Right.
And, a big part of it is to preserve Darwinian evolution theory. And that's why they bring in all this alien stuff. Oh, it's aliens that built the pyramids. It's aliens that set off nuclear weapons 12,000
It was us.
years.
It was us and our ancestors.
It was us and our ancestors. Because once we figure out it was our ancestors that did it, Darwinian evolutionary theory goes out the window. And they can't tolerate that.
That's right. And, of course, it also changed the nature of what is a human being. How advanced are we? How long have we been around?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's all critical. It's all part of the same package to convince us that we are not sentient beings created by God.
Yeah, and there's no intermediate species. And by the way, the eccentric chromosomes, the chromosome number, there's so many differences that make it impossible to create a human being just spontaneously by, we call point mutations. It's ridiculous.
Right.
So this idea of, I believe God recreates what I call punctuated complete recreation to show the fingerprints of God are over us. Now, what's going to happen probably in the next few years is the following. The globalists are in a panic. They don't know whether or not to go with Romney and Ryan, but I think they want to stick with Obama. And what you're saying is from Homeland Security is that at least your contact believes or thinks that they've heard reports that a financial disaster is coming in the early fall.
Right.
I've been stating that for some time. It's very likely going to happen. It doesn't have to be long. It can be 4 days. It can be a week. They just want it long enough that we have, quote, a war president so Obama can try to slide through or even preempt the election.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all they need. They don't even need, and people say, it's martial law. It's like, that may mean some guy standing at the bank where you can't use your credit card for 5 days. It doesn't mean the full force of it.
It could be
very, very short.
Very short. It could also get out of their control.
Well, the problem is you shut down the power. Most people have 3 days of food and water, and then all of a sudden even the National Guard or all the armies on the planet can't control a population starving to death without water. And as I said before, one of the big problems they have is they have pumps and electrical backup generators for water supply, but they don't have for sewage. So they've never done real planning, and they, of course, never hardened the grid. Senator Lisa Murkowski made sure that the congressional law passed 3 years ago was blocked by her in the Senate. So what we have is a situation where we're not really prepared for any real Earth changes. We're not prepared for a tsunami, New Madrid superquake. By the way, the New Madrid system is connected to the Gulf of Mexico and these sinkholes and to the Macondo drill area off the Gulf of New Orleans.
Right. That's only been fairly recently recognized that that's the case, yes.
Yeah, there's a zigzag fault line connection between New Madrid and the Gulf of Mexico and this giant batholith ocean of oil underneath there. An ocean of oil. We're not talking about oil like, we got a few thousand years of oil.
A century's worth for the entire planet at current consumption rates. Easily.
Or much more than that. And the problem is, if we also change our consumption, and also we change our consumption patterns, so we didn't use it for energy, we only use it for petrochemicals and fertilizer and plastics. You need a tiny fraction of that, which would, because eventually we're going to get to safe what we call fusion, tokamak fusion reactors and other technologies, such as, the RAND Corporation's plan in the 70s to take solar wind generators, literally taking the solar wind, generating microwave beams to ground stations to transmit along plasma lines all over the planet. So, we got geothermal here in California. We don't need any nuclear reactors, same way as Japan. If they did geothermal just like they do in Iceland, they would never need nuclear reactors ever.
Right.
Ever. For billions of years. Literally, it's crazy that we even consider any other technology. Why do we do that? I don't understand it.
Well, geothermal is fairly easy. You just dig down deep enough and put water in there and you get steam.
Well, they have a plant here in Hemet, which is just around the corner, another one in Temecula, huge giant plants that right here in California generate almost unlimited energy. So, So, people need to evaluate, we're not setting dates. We're telling them to get prepared. We're saying we have evidence that these things are coming.
Absolutely.
But we're telling them...
Dr. Bill, I'm going to be bailing out of here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So again, I think you're on track. I'm hoping you're wrong. Back to the Nutrimedical report, and some interesting things in development. Of course, we know that there's a lot of forces at play here in terms of the possible Syrian-Iranian attack, and we have Congressman Walter B. Jones has got a bill in Resolution 107 calling for impeachment of Obama if he attacks Iran or Syria. I think if Obama thinks he's going to be losing the election, he may well greenlight an attack. But I don't think the Israelis are really ready. I think the internal revolts will actually delay it considerably until they think that they can deal with the casualties that can happen. I think also the most likely thing to happen first is, believe it or not, an economic implosion. That will probably be painful, and then, of course, they always have the solution ready to deal with it. On top of that, we have climate shift causing major loss of crops all over the world, so cost of food is going to go up. We have a shift from OPEC to South America, to Venezuela and Brazil, to Belize and other areas where oil is here in North America, to Alaska, to the oil shale deposits across the United States and the oil tar sands in Canada. We also have earth changes occurring, and we have Ann and Christina. Tell us about the latest in terms of what's going on with the earth changes and the major sinkhole developments that are occurring, the volcanism and all the other things that are happening to our planet. Do you have some update reports, Christina?
Well, we've had some pretty major earthquakes in the last week. In fact, the number of earthquakes is astounding. 572 in the past week alone, above a 2.5. We had a 7.6 in the Philippines today, a couple in the high sixes in the Jan Mayen region that's between Greenland and Iceland, just north of Iceland, which is a very rare spot for a big quake like that. 4.1 in Yorba Linda. We had also the swarm in Brawley. I think the highest one there was a 5.5. 7.3 in El Salvador, 6.6 in Indonesia. And then all this was preceded by the large 7.7 in Russia about a week and a half ago. I've been watching some of the buoy movement, NOAA, and the Japan buoys and the Indonesia buoys have been going off for a few days now, showing that the ocean floor seems to be rising or pushing up.
How much is it rising? Because you mentioned the number earlier today before the show.
Yeah, I believe it was 110 meters in Indonesia. And then yesterday we had a 5.5 and a 4.6 off of Honshu, and just within the last hour there were two more there, a 4.5 and a 4.4. And it's really concerning, especially what's going on at the Fukushima plant. You and I didn't even have a chance to talk about this earlier because it was supposed to be fixed. They've been having problems keeping up the coolant level in reactors 1 through 3. And it's being reported by Kyoto this afternoon that the water levels are still dropping, even though they flushed the pipes. TEPCO is unsure whether the flow will recover, and they don't know why it's not filling up the reactors. And it's at a level now.
Well, I can make a 90 to 95% guess that all it is a gradual deterioration with neutron annealing of the seal. No matter how many pumps they put on there, if the seal for that reactor cooling pool eventually degrades, the pumps can't keep it. In fact, the engineers have talked about this, including Arnie Gunderson, that once the seal breaks down, no amount of pumping or high-speed pumps will fix the problem. And when that happens, they've taken out the easiest bundles to remove, which are the newer ones. The older ones are very unstable. They're very hot. They're also damaged by these inch-long chunks of concrete down there that are blocking removal of these bundles that are probably twisted. And there's subsidence of the whole reactor cooling pool in these other buildings, so it means that the superstructure is twisted, so it's not going to be as clear a problem. They have to have cranes to pull out these bundles. What's likely to happen is that one or more of them are going to reach what's called critical temperature if they haven't fixed the problem, which they averted about 6 weeks ago. They actually had a D-Day, or D-minute, when they expected that it would hit critical temperature at a certain time around 2 or 3 in the morning, about a month and a half ago, and if it did, they expected to see these cooling pool fuel rod assemblies blow their cork like champagne bottles on the tarmac in Phoenix at 115 degrees. So what we're likely to see is a major release of radiation, as I said already, and I predicted that it would happen this summer, sometime in July or August. It looks like we're on track because I'm seeing radiation spikes on my detector into the 70s now, and they're very short. They don't last more than so many minutes, and then you just drop back again. So what's this? You know, it's like a wave of radiation. But they did the 61st release of radiation from Fukushima. We also have sinkholes all over the planet. And, of course, Stan Dale's theory, as I mentioned in the earlier segment, it seems to make more sense that there is something going on with actually planetary remodeling. So something's happening to the remodeling of the actual planet, where sinkholes are developing all over the place, and subsidence that are near fault lines. The area around Louisiana where this sinkhole is actually connected with the same fault line system that goes out to the Macondo drill site and all the way up to New Madrid as well. So there's something really bad about to happen in these areas.
It would sure seem that way. And just in the last few days, the helicopters from the New Madrid have really been going off, all of them really along the New Madrid fault line. I looked into it after someone had sent me an article from National Geographic talking about the water weight of heavy rains possibly precipitating earthquake activity. And this was published in 2009, and so when I went to the helicorters, I was really surprised at the amount of activity that's going on there. And that, coupled with the fact that we have a lot of nuke plants right now that are having problems with tritium leaking underground. So pipes are breaking under the plants, and where this has been the most noticed is at the plant about 40 miles north of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And you think of where the proximity is to the sinkhole, the Macondo well, and the New Madrid, it's all along that line. And they've had a problem that's been worsening since December when it was first discovered. They had 22,000 picocuries per liter being measured in their groundwater wells. It's now up to 432,000 picocuries per liter. So something's really leaking under there, and they can't find the source. They're drilling new wells.
Well, the reason why that's happening, and just give some theory behind this. As a chemist, what we're having is the nuclear reaction of the Earth creates the batholith of oil. You take smaller molecules like methane and shorter chain hydrocarbons, and over millions of years, under nuclear reactions with radioisotopes, it literally catalytically creates longer and bigger chain molecules. And that's what's happening. These radioisotopes indicate that deep chambers inside the batholiths and the air chambers of the Earth itself, the tectonic plates, are releasing gases through fault lines because there's about to be a major shift.
Well, okay. They do think that there was a cover-up apparently in that area when Texas Brine drilled that sinkhole, and they didn't tell the public, but the government gave them permission to fill their cavern that's in the salt dome with radioactive, which they're calling natural radioactive sources. Well, what they call natural radioactive sources is that when you do drilling, you get radioactivity of the scale, and they call it a common byproduct of oil and gas exploration and production. And so they said that they gave them permission, but they didn't tell the public they gave them permission. And they took 20 cubic feet of natural occurring radioactive material and pumped it into the cavern and into another Texas brine salt cavern in another parish. So part of this, I agree with you.
Part of it is the idea they're pumping in radioactive material. It's also part of the cover-up, because I've dug back some forensic work going back to 1951 where they're told not to drill at the Macondo drill site, and it's because the oil industry has known this. And the reason why I knew is one of my friends, her name is Connie Musso. That's her maiden name. She's an oil engineer. She worked in Russia, all over the world. She's what's called a deep oil engineer. And her husband also is a senior oil engineer as well, works in Kazakhstan. They're close friends of mine. The oil industry is known for 60 years about abiotic oil. It's a big lie that it's from ferns and dinosaurs. It's a big lie. The oil industry wants to make sure you believe that this lie of want, that there isn't enough of it, but it's created by nuclear reactions deep in the bowels of the Earth. Welcome back, and you mentioned something very important. It ties in with the methane batholith and these migration channels from the methane clath rates that were disrupted at Macondo 2 years ago. And I believe it's connected with what's going on in Louisiana. Now they have also the overburden of this storm constantly sitting for now days over Louisiana, dumping more and more water, knocking off power to half the state. And also the pressure of water combined with these new fissures and sinkholes, and they're seeing radon come up and methane. Tell us all about your analysis of what's going on and what this means.
Well, apparently the oil companies want to mine methane. That's natural gas, because oil and petroleum products are now they're kind of like bad words in the energy market. But natural gas is still okay. But in order to mine it, they have to go into these big methane caverns where the methane is under pressure. And ever since that blow up in the Gulf of Mexico, now that cavern was 5 miles down, but they've noticed that there have been fissures that have been they've been going into the shorelines of Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama, and they're deep, and so these. The methane was disturbed. The cavern was disturbed. We know it was disturbed. And that methane is under a great deal of pressure. And so if it can find a migration channel, like through a fissure, then you're going to have methane linking down to the ground. And you're going to have like swamp gas and things like that. Well, those things just automatically can cause a great deal of damage just by themselves. And if that cavern then leaks out enough of the methane, you could have a methane explosion.
Yeah, I think that we're going to be surprised at the Earth changes. I'd say there's a high likelihood in the next, say, 5 years of a New Madrid fault and or San Andreas fault, especially with the earthquakes that are happening right along the California-Mexico border, right along the extension for the San Andreas. The Madrid is going off the scale. Talk about that for a moment, because, and Christina, you can hop in here any time, because we need to have people understand that this is science. We don't have all the answers, but we're raising more questions because the Earth changes are happening. We're having climate change. We're also having Earth changes itself. The planet is remodeling.
The planet is remodeling. We have the magnetic North Pole racing from the Alaska-Canada border. It was right above the border there between Canada and Alaska, and it is now hitting very fast in geological terms. I mean, we're talking about feet per year towards Siberia. So it's heading back to where it started, which would be above Greenwich, England. And that means that the core of the Earth must be rotating, because that's the only thing that's going to move the magnetic pole, is if the core of the Earth, which is a torus, a nickel-iron torus, if it changes its angle of rotation, then that magnetic pole is going to move, and we know that it's moving. I mean, we're watching it move, the scientists are. And we also have a change in the tilt of the Earth, and it's now 9 feet closer to Greenwich than it was. So we've had a slight change in the angle of the tilt of the Earth. And what we've been thinking is that this object coming into the solar system is aggravating that, and that because we have the core of the Earth rotating and changing its angle of rotation, that it's that the crustal part, that's the part that we live on, the tectonic plates are slipping on the core, and we are expecting considerable tectonic movement in the coming years.
Yeah, and syzygy, which is alignment of planets, perigee, which is a close approach to, say, the moon, increases the risk of that, as well as the equinoxes and high tides. So all those things combined increase the risk of a major quake. As we move within the next few weeks to the September 21st period, we're increasing the risk that we're going to get an energy release. But these major, if you look at the actual seismic charts which you sent me the link to, Christina, this is very scary looking.
It is, and another factor too is the massive amount of water that we have that are coming off the Arctic zone. Historical melt, that water is heavy. NASA had pointed out 2 years ago that the ocean floor is sinking from the weight of some of this water. That could be affecting some of the crustal movement as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, they say that 7.9 earthquake that occurred didn't create the tsunami, but it could have. It was a little bit deeper than you would expect a tsunami to be generated. It was 20 miles down instead of 8, and that was probably part of the reason. And also, it might have been a slip fracture instead of a primary fracture that would have gone up and down and moved the ocean. That's why they issued the tsunami warning. And when I read their news reports, they're a little unsure why there wasn't a bigger tsunami. I mean, they said it could have generated a big tsunami, but it didn't, and they're not quite sure why it didn't. It was on a subduction zone, and those quakes that occur, especially if they're 7.8, are likely to create big tsunamis that'll cross the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, either something neutralized it. In other words, you got to figure an opposite force must have neutralized the tsunami at the generation site. Preparedness. What do you tell people to do, Christina, and in terms of preparing for food shortages, a possible economic seizure, I would say, sometime in the next 6 months to a year. We know the fiscal cliff. These are real things. You can Google it. So people say, well, I'm a skeptic. Good. Be a skeptic. But realize that food shortages are going to happen. Food prices are going up. The banks are doing all kinds of stupid things that aren't going to fix it. They're not just putting a firewall between the speculative economy and the real economy with Glass-Steagall. There's no talk that I hear so far, although they want to, quote, have a balanced budget, to yet put up not only Glass-Steagall, but also to bring back the Federal Reserve and make it only under the control of Congress. We have also the green light for a war in the Middle East, which we know will cause the price of oil to go through the ceiling. We have the meltdown of Europe. People should realize we're not trying to be negative. We're trying to be realistic so you can plan for what could happen and be prepared for it. What do you tell them?
And you start waking up to any one of those things that you just mentioned leads to everything else and how it's all tied in together. I mean, how I prepare is going to be different from how you will, depending on your financial resources and so forth. I just tell everyone to do what you can, be aware of what's going on, but the number one thing that you need to do is prepare mentally. Outside of buying a lot of stuff, I don't think is really necessary. You can take a lot of free classes at some of the local sporting goods stores, REI and even Cabela's and Bass Pro. I mean, they have free classes on all kinds of survival and camping stuff. Educate yourself. Do what you can on your limited budget. And, you can find a lot of items even at a dollar store. And just stock up on food wherever you can. Water is really important. Learn how to make a container to filter rainwater outside through clay. It's real easy if you just have, 2 Tupperware containers. So it's going to depend. It's going to be different for different people, low cost versus high cost. But the number one thing is to prepare mentally.
Yeah, and I tell people start off with simple things. 3 weeks of water, get canned goods and other dry goods. Start getting things like our specials for preparewise.com/Dr. Bill. We have specials there now. You can get for a few $100, enough food for several months for your family. Get heritage seeds. Just be prepared with even having pots so you can actually put water in them, and then getting some 100-well poly and deck screws and some 2x4s. You can even make a greenhouse, even this or even along the side of your house, no matter how far north you are. If you can heat it and keep the soil temperature above 50 degrees, you can grow food year-round if you can get in a south-facing area of your home. It's a lot easier than people think to actually survive, but you have to start thinking of these skill sets now and simply do some simple actions. So,
replace fear with curiosity. And learn as much as you can, because all that will help. And John has mentioned on his show, too, about taking a course in, first aid, how beneficial that would be. Yeah,
I tell the first aid course, one of the best ones is the CERT course with the local fire department, CERT. You can get the CERT manual. Get involved. Ask questions. Don't just think that, we're doing this because it's strange radio entertainment. No, it's not. We know if we're going to preserve America, we're going to preserve human civilization through another catastrophe. It's because we ask the right questions. We inspire you to realize you're not a victim. You can be an active person that can protect yourself, your family, your city and town, your society, your country. And then we can move forward. Take care, everybody, over the Labor Day holiday. Take care and drive safely.